Why do so many intelligent, creative people stop bringing their best ideas? Often not because the ideas are missing, but because somewhere along the way they learn it isn't safe to bring something unfinished. And that's why we are here, on a playground. Here, nobody expects a finished concept. Something can begin before it is ready, and others can join in before it is perfect.
We're Jutta and Boris Goldammer from Visionautic Academy. We help leaders move from functioning to creating, from just keeping things running to shaping what matters. In this first episode, we explore what leadership can learn from a playground and how you can create the kind of space where ideas and possibilities show up earlier before they get buried under polished answers and safe routines. A sandbox may look like a strange place to talk about leadership, but actually I think it's quite perfect. Nobody expects a finished concept. Nobody asks, what's the return on investment of this castle?
Yeah. And nobody says, please come back when this idea is fully developed.
True. Although, of course, a playground is not a perfect little paradise either. Someone can step on what you build, someone can laugh or destroy it without even noticing.
And that is why this is such a good place to look at this. You can see both, how easily something can begin and how easily it can be interrupted. In the best moments, something can start very lightly. A line in the sand, a small wall, a small first shape. Children start something, try it out, half of it collapses, and then the next version begins. That's not failure, that's how creating works.
Yes, and something unfinished, a sandcastle or a thought, can also be an invitation. One person has an idea that's not fully formed yet. Another suddenly sees a connection, adds a piece, turns it around, and then something emerges that nobody could have planned alone.
Unfortunately, in many work environments, this space is rare. The threshold is much higher, so a thought often has to be presentable before it's allowed to exist. And that changes everything. Because if every thought has to sound smart before it can be spoken, many of the most interesting contributions never enter the room.
And at the same time, I can understand the other side. If I put myself in the position of a busy leader, I don't necessarily want 10 half-baked ideas in a meeting. You need decisions, you need focus.
Yes, that's a real tension. It's not an invitation to be vague forever. But if we demand polished answers too early, we may not get focus. We may get silence.
There's a quote by Charles Brouwer that says this beautifully. A new idea is delicate. It can be killed by a sneer or a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a joke or worried to death by a frown on the right person's brow.
What strikes me about this quote is how small these moments are. It's not the dramatic fight in the boardroom. It's not the big conflict. It's the tiny reactions. Someone brings up an idea in a meeting and maybe it's still a bit clumsy, maybe not fully thought through. And before the idea has even had a chance, someone sighs or smiles in this way. Or says, yes, but how would this ever work? And suddenly the person who brought the ideas thinks, okay, maybe not.
And often nobody intended to kill anything. That's the tricky part. Most of the time people don't consciously decide, now I'm going to destroy this idea. But the atmosphere tells people very quickly what is welcome and what is not.
And after a while, people don't only stop sharing ideas, they stop bringing their aliveness into the room. They become careful.
And careful is not the same as responsible. Careful can mean I only say what I already know will be accepted. I only bring what I can defend. I only show the part of me that will not create friction. And then the culture can look very professional from the outside, but inside something has gone quiet.
And this matters far beyond producing good ideas. A few years ago, Google ran a large internal research project called Project Aristotle. They wanted to understand why some teams consistently outperformed others. And what they found was surprising. It was not about having the smartest people in the room or the most experienced. The strongest factor was psychological safety.
Boris, I think psychological safety is not a term everybody is familiar with. Can you briefly explain what it means?
Sure. The basic idea is simple. Do people feel safe enough to take a risk in front of each other? Not a physical risk, a human risk. Can I say, I don't know yet? Can I disagree without immediately becoming the difficult person? Can I make a mistake without losing my place? Can I show enthusiasm or doubt or uncertainty? Something real without feeling exposed in the wrong way.
The key word here is risk, because in many organizations, people are not afraid of being physically unsafe.
But they're afraid of looking stupid
Or naive.
or difficult.
Or not senior enough.
And this is where it becomes deeply connected to creating.
Yes, and this is also where many organizations run into contradiction. They say, we want innovation, but at the same time, everything has to sound smart immediately. So people learn to bring the safe idea, the expected idea, the version that won't get them into trouble. And then everybody wonders why nothing really new is emerging.
We know this from our own story as well. Jutta, maybe you can talk a little how it was when we started Visionautics.
Yeah, sure. When we started Visionautic Academy shortly after university and without much work experience, we were surrounded by exactly that kind of reactions Charles Brouwer talks about. Raised eyebrows, doubts, concerned advice. Why don't you do something more secure? How is this ever going to work? And the difficult thing wasn't that people were negative. The difficult thing was that we already had enough doubts ourselves.
So those reactions landed on fertile ground.
Yes. Our idea of Visionautic Academy survived, luckily. But it took strength not to let those voices become louder than the idea itself. And I often think, how many ideas don't survive that phase? Not because they are bad, but because they meet discouragement before they had enough possibilities to grow roots.
And this is where leadership becomes very concrete. Because as leaders, facilitators, colleagues, even as friends, we help shape the atmosphere in which ideas appear. Not only through strategy or formal decisions, also through the small things. How we listen, how fast we judge, whether we allow a pause, whether we ask one more question before we evaluate. A raised eyebrow shapes culture, but so does genuine interest.
Let's make that very practical. A useful set of questions is, do people around us feel they have to be polished before they speak? Or can they think out loud? Can something unfinished exist for a moment? Or does everything immediately get categorized, optimized, judged, or dismissed?
And there are very practical ways to create more safety. Separate the moment where an idea appears from the moment where it is tested, so the idea can breathe before it is evaluated. Create smaller spaces where it is easier to speak freely. Model not knowing yourself by saying, I don't know yet, let's explore this. And make sure people are seen and heard before the real work starts.
We've seen this again and again in our work with teams and international projects. At the beginning, investing in trust can feel inefficient. People want to get to the decisions, to the tasks, to the output. And we know this pressure very well. But whenever we really made space for people to meet as human beings first, to understand something about each other, to build trust, to feel seen and heard, the later work started to flow more easily with less friction. Decisions came faster, conflicts became less dramatic. People could let go more easily because they trusted that others would take care of their part.
And I want to make one thing really clear. This is not about creating a cozy space where nobody is challenged. Actually, real creative work needs challenge. But it needs a kind of challenge where people don't have to protect their image while they are thinking. Where they don't have to prove that they are valuable before they are allowed to contribute.
Yes, a safe enough space is not a space without friction. It's a space where there's enough trust that friction can be creative instead of destructive.
So the question is not only how do we get better ideas?
The question is, what kind of atmosphere are we helping to create? One where people become smaller and more careful, or one where people dare to bring something unfinished, human, and alive?
Because when people feel safe enough to think, to question, to try, to show something before it is perfect, they don't only bring better ideas, they bring more of themselves.
And that is where creating begins.